So, guys, I want to talk about the South Park episode Going Native. And there's a couple of things that I do want to say about this episode. Like, I do think that there's a couple of things that are very important. Like, this is definitely an episode about friendship. And it's also an episode about, like, how people decide to consider themselves a native or say, I have a heritage or my nationality is this when really they've not when really it's kind of hypocritical. Like how many of the characters say that because they are a resident of Hawaii or they've been there for like 2 years, that means they have the same rights as like a native that's lived there for, hundreds of years or thousands of years. And then the other thing about it is this really kind of sets up the friendship between Kenny and Butters. And then it's also really about friendship and it's also really about, mental health in a way and blaming things on genetics and also using substances to deal with problems. So what happens is that this episode opens with Butters Butters getting into a fight with Scott Malkinson, a kid with diabetes. So Butters locks himself in the bathroom and he's saying, "Leave me alone." And then what happens is that he hears Cartman make a smart ass comment about him, and other people just like try to correct him. And then he does a fourth wall joke where he says like, what, Kyle and Stan and everybody else has their heads up their butt. It's not just Cartman who is who's just a jerk. And then also he's saying like Stan and Kyle, you guys act like you're the freaking expert. You act like you guys are all moral and everything like that. And that's kind of like a joke because definitely with the show of South Park, both Kyle and Stan are the voices of reason because they are based on Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And then also, too, you kind of see two things with it, that this is a Butters episode and this is also a Butters revenge episode. So, then that just means episodes where, Butters walks out the victor because usually in many episodes he gets taken advantage of, so at least he gets to mouth off to Cartman and also other people without any consequences. Like, there's no consequences for his behavior. So it's later revealed that what happens is he goes to the principal's office and then his parents are there and he mouths off to his parents. So now you kind of see that this is very out of character for Butters because two things happen. Like Butters' parents usually abuse him to discipline him and they also ground him a lot, and now he has the courage to stand up to his father. So what Trey Parker and Matt Stone are hinting at is that this is very out of character for Butters. And then what happens is that they reveal that Butters was not born of Colorado, and later he was born of Hawaii. So there's a couple of things that I want to say about it. That first of all, it's that issue too of how some people, when their children have behavioral issues, they may blame genetics, but still you got to create consequences for their actions. And obviously, if we kind of see this in Butter and the Stotch family that his grandmother is a bully, his father is abusive and a bully towards Butters, and his father has issues with emotional immaturity. And what do you see Butters? He has, in this episode, he has an anger issue. He gets worked up very easily. So even though it is genetics, he's predisposed to anger issues. He's predisposed to emotional immaturity. He's predisposed to bullying, and he's also predisposed to insecurity and other things. Definitely. And even though like he has those issues, his parents should be like, okay, you're grounded when you get back, because even though, we know that it's a genetic thing, you still have to treat other human beings with respect and dignity. And then the other thing about that is it's kind of revealed that, he's native of Hawaii. So definitely there's a joke, because I think what's said about the South Park creators is that usually what happens is that they usually go to Hawaii for a couple of weeks in between shows to kind of get ideas and get some rest. And also they bring the writers there because they have the money to do that. And that's what happens. Pardon me, there's some asshole drilling in the hallway. And what happens is also that when he goes to Hawaii, they kind of said that, Butters, your parents were there in the time of the king. So it's kind of that joke, two jokes, is that, the king, some people associate Elvis Presley as the king of Hawaii, when actually I think there's the most famous king, if I'm saying his name right, is Kamehameha. I think he was a king or something like that, but there's other more famous kings of Hawaii, or it was originally a Polynesian island, if I'm correct. I don't know my Hawaii history. But the point of it is how like sometimes people will consider themselves, like there's like for example, like Haiti's owned by France if I'm correct, but obviously there's some French people who are white who will say, you know what, I am Haitian because I was born in Haiti, when actually no, you're like the whitest thing possible, and then actually you speak French and you've never spent time in Haiti, or maybe when you've been there or have a place there, you have a nice part of it. You don't kind of see the poverty and whatever. So there is a sense of how people claim an identity or claim a culture that they don't really spend time in getting to know, or also it's almost like another country's kind of taken over that area and it's their territory, but they obviously, but you're obviously not exposed to the culture or the problems. Or you may say, well, I've been there a month, therefore I'm that really. Or like, for example, like Puerto Rico is owned by the US, but obviously if I spend a vacation in Puerto Rico, doesn't mean that I'm Puerto Rican, you know, that, but a lot of people will do that where they will be like, okay, well, no, I am that because I spent time there. Or there's some people who are English, who have places in Cape Town, South Africa. They're pure white, but they say that they're Africans when they're not Africans. You know, or they say like I'm black or African diaspora when they're clearly white skinned. But there's a lot of people who do that. Just say like I'm part of this heritage, or I'm part of this nationality, or I'm part of this race, because I've lived here for a couple of months, when that's actually not the case, really. So when he goes to, and then also, as I said, that the other thing is that Butters gets a pass for his behavior when he should be getting more corrective parenting. So he can't go to Hawaii because the flight attendant thinks that he's drunk. It's a classic, poor Butters joke, and then Kenny goes along with him. And as people said, that we know that in the future, Kenny becomes a scientist, Butters becomes Victor Chouse, and they actually work together. So obviously, this kind of is like setting up their friendship. And definitely, Kenny goes with Butters, and it's really about like friendship, because obviously everybody could have been like, because everybody's attitude was like, okay, well, Butters mouthed off to us, so fuck Butters. And it's also about hypocrisy, because obviously people take advantage of Butters. And even like that episode where Butters is accused of taking a bad picture of himself for picture day. Everybody says, oh, we're going to beat his ass or whatever, or sometimes, or even if you look at what happened to Kyle and Stan, what they did to Butters. Like when Cartman was, when Cartman was like giving Butters NyQuil and other things during the sleepover, Cartman was telling Kyle and Stan, what was happening to Butters. But they chose not to intervene and be like, okay, Butters, you are naive. You are being drugged and these things are happening to you. Or they don't even tell Butters' parents that Cartman sexually assaulted him, because they see the picture of the oral sex that Cartman did. So obviously, it's kind of hypocritical. They get mad over Butters mouthing off to them, but they've allowed Butters to be bullied. They've bullied Butters. There's maybe some hint that they actually beat up Butters, and there's also that Butters got sexually assaulted by Cartman, I think in a later episode or earlier episode, the Cartman Sucks episode, and they don't talk to his parents about that. Like, obviously, if your friend is being sexually assaulted at a sleepover, a good friend would say, you know what, this is going on, and this needs to stop because I don't want the same type of things to happen to you. That's not cool. And it shows like how some people get super sensitive when one bad thing happens to them, but there's people like Butters who a lot of bad things happen to him, but he flips that out at people one time and acts out of character one time. People are done with him. People have that hypocrisy, but at least Kenny chooses to be friends with Butters in this episode, and then he gets rewarded with a vacation and other things. So it helps to be there for your friends, not necessarily for Kenny. Kenny doesn't want the vacation; he wants to. But through peer pressure, he goes to Hawaii. But I also think there is a sense of, he could have easily tell people to fuck off and leave Butters alone, really. But he's there to help Butters. So definitely there's rewards of being friends with people. And they go to Hawaii, and it kind of, and then meet Butters' family. And they kind of talk about issues that they don't like. I think this actually looks a lot like Oahu or Maui, because you kind of see the same type of hills and of hillsides and all of forest and vegetation. I've been to Oahu and Maui last year. I've been to Maui, and I've also been to Honolulu last year. I've been going to visit all 50 states, so I'm happy I knocked those off. But definitely there's a lot of like mountain ranges in South Park. They captured that very very well. And then I'm not sure if Holly's a real term, but they kind of have. But Butters' extended family, they don't like people moving in, and I mean they don't like the tourists and everything like that. They kind of really just like kind of place themselves, and they get rewards and other things like that, and like discounts. So it is kind of almost like hypocritical because some of them said they've been there for a couple of years or 2 months, or they moved there the year before, and they think that they're actually Hawaiian residents, and maybe in their psychology they kind of act like they've been there thousands of years, or they have the same way to kind of fight for people not to move there or vacation there, versus people who are like, okay, well, we've lived here since the 1800s, or we've had families come over on boats, tens of thousands of years ago. Those people have more of a, in my opinion, right to say something because their heritage has been there longer. So they don't kind of realize that they're acting entitled. They don't like the tourists moving in. Butters has a ceremony, and then that gets interrupted, and they're kind of attacking like tourists and other things like that. So it is kind of like they're having an insurrection. So it is kind of like what we kind of see even with the insurrection that happened a few years ago, where some people think that they're entitled to defend something or defend a land or defend a philosophy when they're not really entitled to. And then the other thing is also too that obviously their ceremony is for Butters to get a chi-chi drink that has a lot of vodka and other things like that. So it's obviously a bad thing for two reasons. That obviously it is a stereotype, of Hawaiians that they're alcoholics, or everybody who goes to Hawaii likes expensive cocktails, or Hawaii is just not, or just a place for expensive cocktails. So unfortunately, Butters gets kind of brought into that, and then we kind of see that issue with both Stan and Butters. That Stan becomes an alcoholic like his father, and now Butters is becoming an alcoholic just like his other family members. Like that may happen off screen where Butters' mom and dad may like exotic drinks and other things like that. And also, there may be an addiction to vacations. Or also, you kind of even see with Mr. Stotch, his liaisons. He finds comfort in his vices, and that's kind of like the thing. Drinking is a vice. Traveling is a vice. Obviously, prostitution and secret affairs, that is a vice. So like definitely we're kind of seeing how Butters is being brought into a vice as well, really. So they kind of encourage that generational ideology where they're kind of like, okay, Butters, your Hapanoa got messed up because people are moving in, so they're trying to teach Butters that same entitlement. Butters was born in Hawaii. He may have lived there for less than 2 months, less than a couple of months when he was born there. And then also, too, he's just been there for a couple of hours. And now they're having him, or a couple of hours or a couple of days, but now they're having him, act like, he's like a native, or fighting for like land that's kind of been disputed for thousands of years. They're kind of like teaching Butters that same type of ideology of, even though you've been here, maybe for a few months total because he was born there, and maybe Linda and Steve, his parents, both, Linda and Chris, maybe they've been there for a couple months. So Butters has probably been in Hawaii less than like 5 months, but he's acting like, he has every right to call people a skank and put them on planes, and then also just fight for his land and whatever. So it's kind of like, as I said many times, it's about like how people feel very entitled, or how, you find a piece of paradise and then you're like, what, I actually own it, but then other people try to take advantage. You're like, no, well, it's wrong for you to come, but I have every right to kind of, really just argue when I don't get my way, or when, I found my paradise, but I don't want other people to enjoy my paradise. Like, I always wanted to visit Japan. And if I really like Japan, I really love it, and there's not a lot of tourism, what happens if I want to move to Japan? Or what would happen if I want to retire to Japan? Or what would happen if I want to spend like a 3-week vacation in Japan? And then they say, okay, well, Japan's going to have a lot of people come because people just want to visit Japan. And I'm acting like, oh, well, I'm Japanese. Japan is my sacred land. I've been there for like 3 weeks. It seems kind of ludicrous. So it's unfortunate that that happens. But later on in the episode, it's also funny because they kind of like Butter's family they kind of make Kenny do like an obstacle on a surfboard. So it's kind of like they also have like Hawaiian stereotypes. Like all Hawaiians should drink. They should know like exotic games. They should know how to surf. And Kenny can't do it, and they kind of like are saying, "Oh, we're done with you." So it's kind of funny how, they kind of have expectations for Kenny to prove that he belongs when they don't really belong to like Native Hawaiian culture. And then later on in the episode, Kenny saves the day by bringing them chi-chis and all that. So it kind of goes down to that type of thing too, where Kenny gets over because he gives them alcohol. So it is kind of like saying like how some people can earn other people's respects or be in some other people's club just because of bribery or providing a vice like alcohol or other things. So it's definitely like an interesting episode. But I will say that they also at the end of the episode, I think like Butters realizes that he has a lot of anger, but he needs to control himself, and he's also kind of just insecure about people who are successful, really. So I think he kind of learns that over time that some of his anger is because of his insecurity. So it's definitely good for him to learn humility. But he kind of makes a joke about the movie Argo, which came out. It was a movie that Ben Affleck directed. He won Best Director and won Best Picture. But obviously, it's kind of a joke to pop culture at that time. But it's also kind of a joke as well that some people who are just blindly angry, some of it may come from insecurity. Some of it may come from pent up feelings that they need to psychoanalyze, and Butters does that. But there are some people like Butters' family which relies on their vices, such as alcohol, sexual deviancy, or bullying other people. That runs in his family. So it's definitely a precautionary episode about like how we kind of look at heritage and we think we're entitled to act a certain way, or we hear about our genetics and we think that we should get passes when we act a certain way, but also the power of friendship. And then ultimately when we look at the character of Butters, that he chooses to grow and he chooses to be a better person, and he is kind of self-aware that and self-awareness is a value. And I think that's something we see in Butters' character, that his big issue is that he is naive and he doesn't really learn how not to be taken advantage of, but he does have a sense of learning how to be kinder to the people that he hurts. And that's kind of why I think he and Kenny are both successful in the future, and people are kind of drawn to them because unlike Cartman, except in that timeline where he becomes a Jewish rabbi, all the other characters, I think over time as they grow, learn to be better people, and that doesn't happen to Cartman. And usually when it doesn't happen to you, nobody wants to help build you up when they see Cartman with issues where he needs rehabilitation and other things. So definitely, how we treat others and how we don't make excuses for ourselves will take us a very long way. And when we do that, we are going native. We are just making excuses. We're blaming our genetics. We're blaming our things on our entitlement. And I think that's the episode's point. Don't blame things. Don't use your entitlement to act like don't entitlement is a very bad thing. It's definitely multi-layered. There are people who make excuses for bad behaviors because they believe they're entitled and they to passes because of their genetics, or people in some cases think that they're entitled to claim a race or a culture or an identity when they've not really spent time getting to actually know the real history behind a culture, been to places for thousands upon thousands of years with deep lineage and other things like that. So it's a very interesting episode, definitely very avant-garde.